Have you ever wondered why some people rise above challenges while others retreat in fear? History tells us that every triumph, whether on the battlefield, in business, or in art, has one common thread: courage. From the soldier who advances against impossible odds to the entrepreneur who bets everything on an untested idea, greatness has always been purchased with bravery. In fact, research shows that people who take calculated risks not only achieve more but also live with greater satisfaction. The question is, what role does courage play in your own story? As Aristotle once wrote, courage is the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees the others. This truth holds across centuries. Whether it was a Greek statesman silencing fear with reason, or a modern activist challenging injustice, the lesson remains the same: courage isn't reserved for the few, it's the foundation for all. Think about it, without courage, could we ever innovate, lead, or love deeply? The very fabric of society rests on people willing to step into the unknown. To make this practical, consider courage as the keystone of human growth. Just like a bridge collapses without its central stone, our personal and professional development falters without bravery. Courage doesn't always show up in dramatic moments. Sometimes, it's simply speaking up in a meeting, asking for a raise, or admitting a mistake. Other times, it's moving across the world, launching a bold idea, or standing up for what you believe in. Courage, at its core, is both extraordinary and ordinary. So, what do we gain from studying courage? These insights lay out timeless strategies to master fear, think logically in moments of doubt, and act boldly even when the stakes are high. You'll discover why reflecting on your fears can actually strengthen you, how ancient thinkers overcame panic with reason, and what courage can accomplish in less than a minute. Ask yourself, if you confronted your fears today instead of avoiding them, what doors might open tomorrow? This is your invitation to lean in. Let courage be the fuel for your growth, your leadership, and your legacy. In the chapters ahead, you'll uncover not just inspiring stories but also practical tools to cultivate bravery in your own life. Because courage isn't a gift for the chosen few, it's a choice available to you right now. So take a deep breath, step forward, and prepare to explore how courage can reshape the course of your life. About the author. Ryan Holiday is a best-selling American author, renowned media strategist, and the owner of a thriving independent bookstore. He also hosts the Daily Stoic podcast, where he shares timeless wisdom for modern life. His acclaimed works include The Daily Stoic, Ego is the Enemy, and The Obstacle is the Way, which have inspired millions worldwide to embrace Stoic philosophy in their personal and professional journeys. Key Takeaway 1. The Courage Dilemma, Hercules' Lesson on Choosing the Hard Path to Glory. The Courage Dilemma, Why True Strength Lies in Choosing the Hard Path. Courage isn't just about charging into battle or standing tall in the face of fire, it's about choices we all make every day. Studies show that most people regret the risks they didn't take more than the ones they did. That truth hits harder when you realize that every breakthrough in history, from social reform to entrepreneurial innovation, was fueled by courage. Without it, progress halts, and potential remains locked away. As Winston Churchill once said, courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities. Because it is the quality which guarantees all others. When we talk about courage, it's often split into two neat boxes: moral courage and physical courage. Moral courage belongs to whistleblowers, truth tellers, and anyone willing to risk reputation for integrity. Physical courage shows up in soldiers, firefighters, and first responders who put their bodies on the line. But here's the question, are they really so different? At their core, both require the same thing: the willingness to face danger, endure hardship, and lean into risk when every instinct tells you to run. Think of it this way, courage is like salt in cooking. On its own, it's unappealing. But paired with life's challenges, it elevates the experience, turning the ordinary into something extraordinary. Hercules, the legendary Greek hero, understood this better than anyone. At a crossroads in his youth, he was offered two paths, one of comfort, ease, and endless pleasure, or one of hardship, struggle, and peril. The easy road promised him comfort. The difficult road promised him something far greater, glory and virtue. Which road would you have chosen? This is where the story transcends myth and becomes a mirror for our own lives. How often do we seek shortcuts, avoiding discomfort, chasing ease instead of embracing the hard but meaningful path? And yet, isn't it true that the struggles we endure, the risks we take, are the very things that shape our character, deepen our resilience, and etch our names into the memory of others? As Maya Angelou reminded us, courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. So, what's the lesson? Courage isn't reserved for heroes of history or gods of myth, it's available to each of us, right now. Every decision that places growth over comfort, principle over popularity, and virtue over ease is an act of courage. The path of Hercules lies before you, too. The only question is, will you take it? Embrace the challenges ahead, lean into the risk, and discover the life-changing power of courage. Key takeaway 2. Conquering fear, ancient wisdom on turning fear into courage. What is it that holds us back from greatness? What makes even the strongest among us falter? In a single word, fear. From public speaking to major life decisions, fear has a way of paralyzing us, stealing opportunities before we can even take the first step. Research shows that fear of failure is one of the top reasons people never pursue their dreams. But here's the paradox: fear is not the enemy of courage, it's the very stage upon which courage is born. As Aristotle once said, "He who has overcome his fears will truly be free." Courage doesn't demand the absence of fear, it requires us to move through it. Think about it, even the bravest soldier, the boldest activist, or the most daring entrepreneur feels fear. The difference is that they push beyond it. But how? The ancient Greeks left us a clue. They understood that logic could disarm fear the same way light cuts through darkness. Instead of letting terror swell into myth, they grounded it in reason. Take Hercules, the great Athenian statesman. When his troops were struck with panic during a violent storm, they saw the thunder as an omen of doom. But Hercules chose reason over superstition. He picked up 2 rocks, smashed them together, and told his men, "Thunder is nothing more than air colliding, just like these stones." By reframing the storm with logic, he replaced terror with clarity. Isn't it remarkable how perspective alone can turn chaos into calm? Now, consider your own fears. How often do you allow them to grow unchecked, turning shadows into monsters? What if you, like Hercules, held them up to the light of reason? Some may prove real, requiring preparation or caution. But others, like thunder mistaken for divine wrath, may vanish entirely when you see them for what they are. Fear thrives in the dark, but logic is the lamp that exposes its illusion. So here's the call to action: don't let unexamined fears rule your decisions. The next time you're scared, pause, probe, and question. Break your fear into pieces until you understand it. Some risks will still remain, but many will dissolve into nothing more than clashing rocks. Embrace the courage born of clarity, and let logic be the tool that transforms fear into freedom. Key takeaway 3. Defining fear, ancient and modern strategies to overcome anxiety. Why is it that the things we fear most often feel the biggest, the darkest, and the most overwhelming? Studies in psychology show that when we face vague or undefined threats, our brains exaggerate them, turning small uncertainties into looming catastrophes. Think about it: how often has an unknown what-if kept you up at night, only to fade once you faced it head-on? As the Stoic philosopher Seneca wisely put it, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The truth is simple yet profound: vagueness amplifies fear. When dangers remain undefined, our minds magnify them into monsters. But when we bring them into the light, outlining their edges, defining their scope, they often shrink before our eyes. Tim Ferriss, best-selling author and entrepreneur, advocates a practice called fear setting. Instead of avoiding fears, you dissect them, articulate them, and make them precise. Isn't it empowering to realize that the very act of naming your fear robs it of its power? This isn't a new idea. The Stoics of ancient Greece and Rome practiced something similar, known as premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. By imagining worst-case scenarios, they prepared their minds for hardship, making life's blows less devastating. It's like training with weights before stepping into the real arena. When you've anticipated the storm, its thunder doesn't shake you quite as much. Doesn't this perspective flip the script on fear itself, turning it from enemy into teacher? Consider John D. Rockefeller, who built one of history's greatest fortunes. He regularly asked himself, suppose the oil fields gave out? By imagining the collapse of his empire, he stayed nimble, prepared, and resilient during market panics. His wealth wasn't just measured in dollars, it was rooted in foresight and mental discipline. Now ask yourself, what fears could you define today that might free you tomorrow? What shadowy what-ifs are you magnifying simply because you refuse to face them? Here's the call to action: don't ignore your fears, define them. Write them down. Examine them. Break them apart until you see their real size. Some will remain serious, but most will lose their exaggerated grip on your mind. Remember, clarity is power, and preparation transforms anxiety into strength. Start practicing fear setting today, and let it sharpen your resilience for tomorrow's challenges. Key takeaway 4. Courage doesn't always roar, how small steps lead to greatness. When most people think of courage, they imagine dramatic acts, soldiers charging into battle, or citizens standing tall against tyrants. These images are inspiring, but they can also be misleading. The truth is, courage often begins not with grand gestures, but with quiet, modest decisions that slowly reshape the course of a life. As Aristotle once observed, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Could it be that bravery, like excellence, is built not in a single moment, but in small, repeated steps? This perspective reshapes how we think about personal growth and resilience. Aristotle believed that just as one becomes a builder by building or a harpist by playing, one becomes courageous by practicing bravery consistently. Courage can begin with small steps, and those steps compound into life-changing momentum. Imagine courage as muscle building. You don't lift the heaviest weight first, you start light and grow stronger over time. Doesn't this idea make courage more accessible to all of us, not just the heroic few? Take Florence Nightingale as an example. In the rigid society of 19th century England, becoming a nurse was seen as beneath a woman of her class. Overwhelmed by the weight of convention, she didn't declare her plan to revolutionize medicine. Instead, she chose a small but daring beginning, working in a hospital for just one summer. That single step would ignite a lifetime of transformation, proving her own words true: never lose an opportunity of urging a practical beginning, however small. But courage is not just about beginning, it's also about direction. Thomas Edison, who believed life was too short to waste on trivial pursuits, sought out the hardest problems he could find. Nightingale started small, Edison aimed big, yet their philosophies intertwine. Small steps are powerful only when taken in meaningful directions. Nightingale's summer in a hospital mattered because it was aligned with her ultimate calling. So ask yourself, are the small risks you're taking today leading you towards something that truly matters? Here's the empowering takeaway: don't wait for the perfect grand moment to prove your bravery. Start with the smallest act of courage available to you, but make sure it points toward a path worth walking. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting, starting a side project, or committing to a single summer like Nightingale, every small step in the right direction compounds into greatness. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers in your first step forward. Key takeaway 5. 30 Seconds of Courage, the call that changed history. In October 1960, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in Atlanta for the simple act of trying to eat at a restaurant inside a department store. What followed was a terrifying ordeal. Southern authorities, determined to break him, denied bail, fabricated charges, and sentenced him to 4 months on a chain gang. For Coretta Scott King, the fear was unbearable. Would her husband be beaten, or worse, lynched? Desperate, she reached out to two men who held the power to intervene: presidential candidates John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. The stakes could not have been higher. History often reminds us that courage isn't always measured in years of sacrifice but in minutes of decisive action. As Aristotle once wrote, courage is the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees the others. Nixon, despite being King's friend and having overseen civil rights reforms, chose silence. Kennedy, however, took the risk. In a few simple phone calls, to the Georgia governor, to Coretta herself, and with Robert Kennedy pressing the judge, he shifted not only King's fate but the course of American politics. Think about it, Kennedy's courage took less than a minute. And yet, it had a seismic impact. King was released. Kennedy gained the loyalty of black voters. And just weeks later, he won the presidency by the slimmest of margins, less than half a percentage point, about 35,000 votes across 2 swing states. Can you imagine how history might have unfolded if Nixon had dialed the same number? Sometimes, destiny is decided in 30 seconds of bravery. This story forces us to ask, how often do we hesitate in moments that demand courage? Whether it's standing up for someone, making a difficult phone call, or saying the words "I quit" to a toxic job, the actions that define us often take only a sliver of our time. Fear stretches the moment in our imagination, but in reality, the bold step itself is often brief. Isn't it ironic that the smallest amount of time can carry the greatest weight in shaping our future? The takeaway is clear: never underestimate the power of a single courageous act. Courage doesn't always roar, it can be as quick as dialing a number, sending an email, or speaking a truth out loud. Kennedy's phone call didn't just save a man, it altered a nation. So the next time you feel fear holding you back, Remember that greatness might only require a few seconds of bravery. Step forward, take that risk, and watch how even the shortest act of courage can echo for a lifetime. Key Takeaway 6. The unsung hero behind MLK, Stanley Levinson's quiet courage. We all know the name Martin Luther King Jr., the Baptist minister whose voice and vision reshaped the 20th century. But how many of us know the name Stanley Levinson? Likely only a fraction. And yet, without him, King's legacy might not have reached the same heights. Levinson quietly drafted speeches, organized fundraising campaigns, and served as one of King's most trusted allies. He was a hidden force behind a movement that would forever change history. But history has a way of testing loyalty in unexpected ways. When President John F. Kennedy learned of allegations that Levinson had ties to communism, he pressured King to sever their connection. In that moment, Levinson faced a choice: defend himself, cling to his role, or risk damaging the very cause he had sacrificed so much to support. His decision was unexpected, and deeply heroic. Levinson didn't protest. He didn't ask King to put friendship before politics. Instead, he stepped away quietly, choosing to protect the movement rather than compromise it. That's not just courage, it's heroism. As philosopher Joseph Campbell once said, a hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. Levinson lived this truth by sacrificing his own role in service of a greater mission. True heroism often hides in the shadows. It's not about glory or headlines, it's about selfless action for the good of others. Think of sports. We remember the Michael Jordans of the world, the stars who shine on the stage. But what about the Bill Cartwrights, the co-captain who helped lead the Chicago Bulls to their first 3 championships? Heroes are not always in the spotlight, sometimes they're the ones making the team stronger, taller, and braver from behind the scenes. Stanley Levinson reminds us of a vital truth: heroism is courage used for others' benefit. Sometimes it means speaking out, other times it means standing tall, and occasionally, it means stepping aside for the greater good. His quiet act of selflessness echoes through history as a reminder that greatness isn't always loud, it's often humble, sacrificial, and profoundly human. Fear is one of the most universal human experiences, yet it is also one of the most paralyzing. In summary, in Courage is Calling, Ryan Holiday shows us that fear is not something to be ignored, it's something to be faced, defined, and understood. Left unchecked, fear magnifies dangers and creates shadows larger than reality. But when confronted honestly, it loses its grip and opens the door to growth, resilience, and strength. Drawing wisdom from both history and philosophy, Holiday reminds us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. The Stoics like Seneca practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining the worst possible outcomes to diminish fear's power. Entrepreneurs like Tim Ferriss modernized this into fear setting, proving that naming our fears is the first step in mastering them. Fear only controls us when we refuse to look it in the eye. But courage is not reserved for grand, cinematic moments. Aristotle believed that bravery is cultivated through consistent action, just as one becomes a builder by building or a musician by playing. Small acts of courage, choosing honesty, taking a step toward a dream, speaking up for what's right, compound over time into a life defined by bravery. Even Florence Nightingale, who revolutionized modern nursing, began with just one small, uncertain step into a hospital ward. Holiday illustrates how courage sometimes demands quick, decisive action. Martin Luther King Jr.'s unjust imprisonment in 1960 could have silenced a movement, but John F. Kennedy's simple act of picking up the phone changed the course of history, and perhaps even won him the presidency. Courage doesn't always take years to build, sometimes it takes only 30 seconds of boldness to change everything. And courage is not always about glory, it is often about sacrifice. Stanley Levinson, one of King's closest advisors, stepped away from the civil rights movement when his presence threatened to tarnish it. His quiet act of heroism reminds us that true courage often means putting others before ourselves. As Holiday notes, heroism is courage in its highest form, bravery not for self, but for the benefit of many. The message is clear: courage calls to each of us daily, whether in life-changing decisions or in the smallest of choices. Do we shrink back, or do we step forward? Do we allow fear to dictate our path, or do we embrace it as the doorway to transformation? Each decision we make is a chance to answer that call. Courage is Calling is more than a book, it is an invitation. An invitation to live boldly, to confront fear with clarity, and to act bravely not just for ourselves, but for the people and causes that matter most. Fortune, after all, doesn't favor the timid. It favors the brave, the ones willing to step into discomfort, risk, and uncertainty for the sake of a life well lived. So as you reflect on these timeless lessons, remember, courage isn't about never being afraid, it's about moving forward in spite of fear. If this message resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to help spread wisdom that can empower others. And if no one told you lately, remember this: you are loved, you are worthy, and you are spectacularly capable of achieving extraordinary goals.